side of things, we are a Microsoft authorized AOSG reseller for GCC High and Azure government licenses, so the Azure Gov space. We are a registered provider organization, or RPO, with the Cyber AB. That is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Accreditation body, so the people who ultimately make the standards for CMMC. And then we are also a registered practitioner member of that Cyber AB, so a number of our resources have gone through the certification there. As far as speakers go today, on the phone with me, or on the line with me today, is Ken Bergeron. Ken is the team lead for our government services team. Been instrumental in kind of setting this up and continuing to grow this practice. And he's also a senior consultant with the Modern Workplace team, which sort of is the umbrella over the top of that. My name is Steve Caprio, and I am the manager of our Modern Workplace team. Across all these slides, you'll see a quick little email address here. If you do need to get in touch with us about any of this, info@Daymark SI is a good place to start. You'll be put in touch with some people from our team. Just a quick scenario and agenda that we're going to be following throughout. Vandelay Industries, subcontractor for DIB prime contractors, Defense Industrial Base. DIB is short for that. They manufacture widgets that end up in larger assemblies and weapon systems purchased by the DoD. During this process, they are sent diagrams, which include their product specifications, but also additional ITAR classified information. This data is stored in a SharePoint site that they have. And our scenario is that an employee named Dan Briggs is trying to log on and access the data. And as the IT group here, we do need to protect that connection and that data. So the agenda is that we will help to secure that connectivity and the corporate data based on the zero trust methodology. We'll understand what CMMC domains and controls are satisfied by the tools and configurations that we're putting forward here, and then what the license requirement is needed to obtain the features that we review. During this, we are going to be covering privileged identity management, conditional access, Intune compliance, Defender for Cloud Apps, and app protection. With that, I will go ahead and jump right in. We do have a really full schedule. We're going to try and leave time for questions at the end, and if we don't get to them, you can drop them in the Q&A section of this meeting to be answered at a later date. We'll reach out to you and follow up. With that, go ahead and kick it over to Ken for a quick demo of PIM.
Great, thanks a lot, Steve. So we'll take a look at PIM, so Privileged Identity Management. Basically a fine-grained control provided by Azure Active Directory service that does provide management, control, and review of those privileged accounts in Office 365 and Azure. Today we'll just focus on the 365 side and show you a couple of the capabilities that the service is capable of. I'll go ahead and first I'll just sign in and go ahead and activate my account because I do have a eligible global admin role that does require activation. So I'll run through that process right now. I'll go ahead and sign in. And once I sign in, I'll go ahead and select Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. And I can go ahead and select my roles to see which roles are available to me. We could see that I do have the global admin. It is a permanent role, but I still do need to activate it and provide a justification. I also need to validate access using multi-factor authentication. So I'll go ahead and approve that two-factor. Okay. So validating the request will be completed shortly. I'll go ahead and give a justification reason to complete the activation. We'll just say PIM and tenant administration. I'll go ahead and activate. We'll let Azure AD do its magic in activating, validating, and activation completion. All right, so that we could see that I am active now. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and run through a quick demonstration of assigning a privileged role to a user in the organization. So what we'll do is I'll select our Azure AD roles. You can see that I have the availability to assign eligibility to assign PIM to a user. You do need to have global admin or the privileged identity role. So I'll go ahead and assign a role. I'll let those populate. You can see there's a list of all the roles available in Azure Active Directory through role-based access control. I'm going to go ahead and search on Intune. And I'll go ahead and let that populate. We can see we have one user that has a start and end time. So they do have a just in time short-term access role that was assigned to them. So I'll go ahead and take a quick look at our role settings here. And we can see that there's some defaults here. So activate max duration, typical 8-hour shift. I can go ahead and shorten this if I wanted to, but we'll leave the defaults for now. You can see that we do require activation using MFA, and we also require approval to activate. And there are members, there's approvers. So if I go ahead and edit this, you can see that I've selected myself, Steve, as the approvers. I'll just go back. And then notifications, for someone who's assigned a role, the admin, all admins receive an alert. Also receives an alert, and the approvers will receive alert that they need to approve once the user goes to activate that role. All right, so we'll go ahead and add an assignment. We'll go and select a user from the directory. And we'll select our user, Jared. Select. I'll select next. Because of our policy and configuration, we do have permanent assignment, but I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. User is eligible to activate. I'm going to change this from a year. And we'll just make a 1-month time frame here, and I'm going to go ahead and assign. We'll let that assignment finish processing. You can see that Jared's been added. He does have that start and end time frame. Another admin could come in here, easily, immediately remove him or update that policy for him, that assignment. So we'll just go ahead and go back to the roles here. And we can see that our assignments show that we have these following admins assigned. We have a bunch of SharePoint admins, we have Intune admins, 3 global admins, and our user administrator. Again, they'll give analytics and all the information around what the role consists of, if it expires or if it's permanent, and then you have the ability to remove or update from this blade view. We also have alerts, and we can go into drill into any one of these and see who hasn't or who has activated. So it'll give us some information there. We can also go ahead and we could take a look at the audit of all the actions performed by any of the administrators. So that does give us that visibility into any roles that are assigned and active and being used. And then I can also see my specific audit for any of those changes. So that's a quick, brief overview of privileged identity management and how to assign a user to one of those roles. We call it a time-based role at this point. I'll send it back over to Steve. He'll review the license requirements as well as the CMMC domain and control associated with that feature. Steve?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Privileged Identity Management is a feature of Azure AD P2, which is available as a standalone license, but it's also included in the bundles listed below: M365 E5, EMS E5, and M365 E5 Security Add-on. As I go through licenses throughout this presentation, it's not exhaustive. Microsoft licensing is quite complex. This license may be available in other places, but these are the bundles that you'll typically find yourself in if you're not buying it standalone. The domains and controls that this particular setting that we've implemented satisfies is the under access control domain, and it's the controls 3.1.2 and 3.1.7. Moving forward, what we do want to do next is cover the scenario of now we have this user and he's logging in, and we need to apply conditional access to him to make sure that when he logs on, he's logging in from a compliant device, and also starting the process of doing the session controls that we have. So going to go ahead and share a quick demo video of setup at least, and then I'll kick it back over to Ken for a live demo of what we're doing. So in the Azure AD portal here, we do want to create a conditional access policy. In order to do that, we will go over to the security blade and click on conditional access. Go ahead and create a new policy here. I'm naming this the session control for SharePoint. We're using one conditional access policy throughout this to kind of streamline things. In this case, we're creating this to manage the data that we've talked about being in SharePoint. Do want to select a specific user. In this case, you could do all users. You could also exclude certain users. For our test, again, we're just focusing on Dan Briggs here, who's our employee that we're solving for in this scenario. Under Cloud Apps, in this section here, you have the option to select all Cloud Apps or specific ones. You can also exclude particular Cloud Apps as well. When you select SharePoint Online, you will be given a bit of a pop-up. The SharePoint Online backends things like Teams and OneDrive, as well as some other features. So when you apply conditional access to SharePoint, just be aware of that you may see some of those effects in Teams and OneDrive as well. Here, we're not using trusted locations, but I did want to call it out as normally that's like a gotcha point for some people. We do want to exclude trusted locations in most cases because that trusted locations would be your secure network. You've secured their connection to your network already, adding additional things like MFA, like in our case here, or the device to be marked as compliant that may have already been satisfied by them being on your network. So we'll go ahead and select those two, and we're going to require both of those. That's an important distinction to make, that we do want both of those to be satisfied in this case. And under session, we are going to choose session controls here, and we're going to use the conditional access app control. We can select to monitor only, in which case we get alerts. You can select to block, or in our case, we're going to use custom policy, which would then point it over to Defender for Cloud Apps. You can put these on in report only mode. For us, we have gone ahead and put it into action here. And to test this, I'm going to go ahead and demo this. We'll go ahead and kick it back over to Ken. Ken, you're on mute.
Yep, great. Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
So we'll go ahead. I've logged in. I'm on my Intune enrolled device. So the device is compliant. I've logged into the portal, the landing page. I'll go ahead and select SharePoint. I am required to do the 2FA prompt approval, so I'll go ahead and do that. All right, and you can see I do make the landing page. I'll switch to a local non-compliant device. And I'll go ahead and sign in the same way. I'm signed in. Okay, great. I've made it to the landing page. I'll go ahead and select SharePoint. And again, I'm required to do the two-factor authentication. Immediately, I get you can't get there from here. This device is not compliant. So that takes us to the end of that demo. I'll go ahead and shift back over to Steve. He'll talk about the licensing and the domain and controls satisfied. Thanks, Steve.
Yep, thanks, Ken. So two things happening there. Obviously, first is that conditional access is required there for the policy that we put in place. That requirement is Azure AD P1 or higher, and that's a standalone, but also included in M365 E3, M365 E5, EMS E3 and E5, and the E5 security add-on. In particular, the piece that we put into place here does satisfy the domain and control identity authentication and 3.5.2. The other thing, and Ken mentioned that he was on a compliant device. We didn't show in the demo here like the Intune enrollment process, but we have enrolled that device on Intune to make it compliant. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of the Intune license requirement here as well. It is a standalone license, but most times Intune is bundled up in some of these EMS E3 and E5, E3, M365 E3 and E5, the business premium SKU, and the M365 E5 security add-on. The device compliance part of this does solve for the access control domain, in particular 3.1.18. With that being said, the other piece that you saw there, you saw that little cloud told Ken that he was, being proxied through, and that his session was being monitored. That's that session control piece. So what we are going to cover next is how we set that up in Defender for Cloud Apps. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up another window here for Defender for Cloud Apps. So we are in the Defender for Cloud Apps portal here, and what we want to do is create a session policy. You can see a couple other dashboards and things here as well, but for us, we're going to go to Control and Policies, and Session Control Policy will be under Conditional Access. Go ahead and create a session policy here. What this is solving for is, there may be data in your in the SharePoint environment that we want to scan and protect from being downloaded. So what we're choosing here is the session control type file download with inspection. You can choose to have device compliance evaluated here as well, but our access is based on device compliance, so we've already kind of satisfied that. You can see here that you can choose from any of the apps that we have ported in here, and that you do have some file filters available to you as well. As I said, this is control with inspection. For our demo purposes, we're not doing any of the other inspection pieces here, but you can put substring, exact match, or regular expression data in here to help inspect the documents if you're using the built-in DLP. And you can choose where you're searching for those expressions in. If you're using the data classification service, you can choose the inspection type here around either sensitivity info type, which is a whole nother topic inside of the Microsoft Purview space. And if you want to use malware detection, you can do that as well and use the built-in threat intelligence features. Again, for us, we're just saying anything in this SharePoint environment is going to be of the highly sensitive ITAR nature. We really don't want it downloaded. We want it in SharePoint and monitored there. So we are putting a block on that. You can customize the block message, and there are also a few other actions that you can apply here if you wanted to. We are selecting to always apply this action, even if it can't be scanned, just to make sure that we get the action of block that we want. And it's possible to do alerts as well. So just again, a little quick recap, the session control type being the control file download, and we have chosen the app, which is SharePoint. We are doing a block action on this. And we'll go ahead and hit create. and that now exists here. So I'm going to go ahead and send this over to Ken for a quick run through of how this looks to Dan, who's signing in to access this. He is on a compliant device in this case. So, Ken?
All right, so Steve mentioned we are on a compliant device. Here are some real quick information about that device compliance and the device status. We are at the previously accessed SharePoint, where we saw the access to SharePoint is monitored. We see the monitored access in the proxy URL. I'll go ahead and continue to SharePoint online. And I'm just going to head over to a document that we'll use to illustrate the blocked download. So I will try and go ahead and download this file. And you can see I do receive a download block message due to organization policy. And we also see a file gets downloaded here. I'll go ahead and open that up, and it says it's blocked as well. So I'll close that out. Another thing I can just quickly show is that if we open this document, because of our policy, we're not allowing that document to be downloaded to open up in a desktop app. So that doesn't open either. And then if we go ahead and try to print, same thing, the download, the temporary download to send to the printer is blocked. So that's blocked as well. And there was the same downloaded file that had the block message. So that illustrates blocking using the Cloud App Defender for Cloud App Security feature. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Ken. Just gonna go ahead and cover Defender for Cloud Apps. The license required here is aptly named Defender for Cloud Apps. There's a lower license of this called Defender for Cloud Apps Discovery, which gives you the ability to kind of see where data is flowing, but not necessarily all these control features. So Defender for Cloud Apps, in the way that we've demonstrated it, is available in M365 E5, M365 E5 Security add-on, or the E5 Compliance add-on, and EMS E5. It does satisfy for the domain of access control. Again, most of this presentation has been focused on the two domains, identity and authentication, as well as access control. In this case, the particular control is 3.1.11. So heading into sort of the last demo here, our user Dan Briggs does have a mobile device that he's going to be using to read some of this data occasionally and access it to maintain productivity. So we do need to set him up to make sure that he's able to securely access that data. In our case, what we're going to be setting up is an app protection policy. So not a full Intune enrollment of that device. We're assuming that it's a BYOD device that is, we do need to provide protection of the Microsoft apps for. I'm going to go ahead and share this. All right, so we are in the Endpoint Management Center, so endpoint.microsoft.us in this case, and we are going to go to Apps and then App Protection Policies. This is what falls under Microsoft the Mobile Application Management Policy rather than Intune, full Intune enrollment. So we are creating an app protection policy here, and we are going to target it to all device types, and in this case, iOS, all device types, and we're going to choose all Microsoft apps. A couple other options there around all apps and core Microsoft apps. The one sweet spot here is all Microsoft apps, which will include things like Outlook, SharePoint, Excel, everything that could be on the device. As far as backing up org data to iTunes and iCloud, we are going to block that. We don't want any of this corporate data ending up on personal iTunes or iCloud. And as far as sending org data to other apps, we really don't want them to be able to grab any of the data from the Microsoft applications and transfer it over to a non-managed app. So we're going to say that we're allowed to do this on policy managed apps. For obvious reasons, saving copies of the org data as well is going to be blocked. We don't want anything to end up on the local storage of that device. Again, an exfiltration point for sensitive information, CUI, ITAR. We'll allow data reception from other apps. So if you're on a web page, we obviously want you to be able to copy and paste something in if it's useful to you. That's not an exfiltration concern for us. And then an important one there just above was restrict cut, copy, and paste between other apps. We're only allowing it between policy managed apps, and Ken will demo what that looks like for you after this setup is complete. As far as other functionality blocks that we're doing, we're not going to allow corporate or policy managed app data to be synced with the native apps. So that's like calendars and things. We don't want that to be synced, and we don't want to be able to print org data. We can also restrict the web content transfer, but for us, we're not going to be doing anything in that space. So we are requiring PIN for access on the device in order to get in. We're going to do a passcode instead of numeric, and we're also going to do non-simple PINs. So there's some requirements of what you're generating there. For us, the select minimum PIN length of 8, that's sort of the sweet spot where we've rolled out most of this before to our other government customers where we've deployed these solutions for. We will allow Touch ID or face instead of PIN, so the biometrics can work here without any issue. Sometimes you might want that to be off, but in our case, we'll go ahead and let that on. We are going to have a PIN reset. 90 days is a bit aggressive, so we're going to do every 180 days. We're asking the users to reset the PINs. And then we do have an app PIN that will also be required. So when you open any of these apps, in addition to the PIN to get into the phone, we've put an app PIN in there. Sort of a best practice, but not absolutely required. The next section here is conditional launch. This is all about, we pretty much stick with the defaults here. This is just all about what specifications are required to get into the device. If there's a max PIN attempts, an offline grace period, again, just leaving those as is. Under assignments, we do need to assign this policy to people. In our case, we've created an all users group for this. We do want this to be for anybody coming into the environment. The only reason for an exclude would be if you were going to apply an even stricter policy to a certain subset of those all users groups. So in this case, no exclusions. Review and create, you can see it gives you an entirety of what our settings were, including all the URLs that are associated with those particular apps. But we'll go ahead and hit create here. And we'll go ahead and have Ken present now just a quick demo of what that looks like on the device to Dan Briggs trying to access this data.
Okay, so you should be able to see the iPhone. This is an Intune enrolled iPhone. And I'll just run through the demo here. We do have a policy managed app. Open up Outlook. We are required to enter the PIN. And I'll go ahead and open up one of the messages that does contain an attachment. And I'll go ahead and open up that document. I've selected a bunch of the text within that document. I'll go ahead and copy that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to paste that into a non-policy managed app, such as a native Notes app in iPhone. And you can see that you get that default message, data cannot be pasted here. I'll go ahead and also try that same action in another non-policy managed app, which is Safari. And we'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and paste. And you can see it doesn't paste any of that data. It gets that default message. Now I'll go ahead and open up Teams. I'll enter the PIN for Teams. And because this is a policy managed app, I'll go ahead and paste that info. And you can see that it does allow that info to be pasted and sent over to Steve. And finally, we'll go ahead and just try to save the document. You can, or print it. You can see that I don't have any options to save it anywhere else besides OneDrive. And there is also no option to print that document. All right, and it does say that we're not allowed to share. So with that, I'll turn that back over to Steve. That ends the app protection demo.
Absolutely. Going to go ahead and just cover some of the things we have been covering on the other pieces here. So app protection policy, Ken's device was Intune enrolled. App protection policies do work on non-enrolled devices. They're based on sign-in, but you do need that Intune license. That's where these feature sets come from. So again, EMS E3, E5, M365, E3, and E5, the business premium SKUs, and the M365 E5 security add-on. In particular, this is again an access control domain, and it solves for 3.1.10 and 3.1.20. That does bring us to the end of the setups and the demos. I do just want to make a note that from a next steps perspective, this recorded webinar will be made available to registrants, and it's also going to be available on our corporate YouTube page. The other important thing to note is just if you need help here, reach out, contact us. We have a lot of experience across the Microsoft 365 space, but more specifically in this government space, offering things like compliance services, the migration of data, design and implementation of these enclaves, if that's the direction you're going, or really just getting started. So love to help you out with anything that you need. We did run over today, so I appreciate it. Looks like most people stayed on. We'll forego questions for now. If you do need to submit anything, please submit to info@daymarksi.com, or if you're familiar with us already, reach out to whoever you know over on this side, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks everybody for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll look forward to doing a couple more of these and continuing to make strides here. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.